If you enjoy wild real-life stories with unexpected twists that leave people speechless, make sure to hit subscribe because this one is going to take you on a ride so unbelievable you'll be shaking your head at how it all unfolded. And trust me, you don't want to miss the ending because when the truth came out, the same woman who thought she could control us with her loud mouth and her speed dial to 911 was left frozen in place, pale as a ghost, realizing she had messed with the absolute wrong people. And not just in the way she thought but in a way that would change the entire neighborhood's power dynamics forever. Because you see, this all started when my wife and I decided to retire earlier than expected and spend more time at the family cabin my grandfather had built with his own two hands nearly 70 years ago, a place that was nestled by the lake surrounded by tall pines and crisp mountain air. And while we thought it was going to be a quiet retreat filled with fishing, long walks, and peaceful evenings by the fire, we had no idea that moving back into that cabin would spark a feud with the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, a woman everyone called Karen. Behind her back though her real name was Brenda, but honestly the nickname fit her like a crown, because she had that attitude, that shrill voice, and that entitled posture that made it clear she thought she was sheriff, judge, and mayor of the whole community all rolled into one. And her first issue with us wasn't even something major but rather the gate at the front of the property, which had rotted over the years and barely swung open without splintering, so my wife, who was incredibly handy, decided to replace it, painting it a beautiful rustic brown that matched the cabin, adding an iron accent with our family initials carved into the wood, something my grandfather would have loved. But the second the paint dried, Karen came marching up in her oversized sun hat, clipboard in hand, and that fake sweet smile plastered on her lips as she announced that modifications to property exteriors require HOA board approval. Which of course was ridiculous because our cabin actually predated the HOA. It was grandfathered and is exempt from most of their ridiculous rules, and legally speaking they had no jurisdiction over us. But Karen never let facts get in the way of her bossy behavior, so she decided she would make our lives miserable until we bent to her will, which led to her calling 911 on my wife one afternoon claiming there was suspicious activity when she saw her adjusting the new hinges on the gate. And when the sheriff's deputy rolled up, lights flashing, he quickly realized it was just my wife with her tool belt fixing something harmless. But Karen put on a whole performance crying about unauthorized construction and threats to neighborhood safety, only to be shut down by the officer who politely explained that no law was being broken. But instead of backing off, she doubled down, filing petty complaints with the HOA board, sending letters to our mailbox signed in big looping cursive, and even gossiping to the other neighbors that we were outsiders, trying to ruin the community aesthetic, which was funny because half of them quietly told us they admired the new gate and were tired of Karen's antics but didn't dare speak up. Yet what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't even fathom, was that my wife and I weren't just some random retirees moving into a cabin. No, we were much more than that, and the truth would hit her like an avalanche, because while my wife looked like the friendliest gardener type on the outside, with her warm smile and soft laugh, she had spent decades as a high-powered corporate attorney known for dismantling bullies like Karen in courtrooms across the country. And as for me, I had recently stepped down from my role as CEO of one of the very development firms that had actually helped finance this neighborhood back when it was just land and blueprints, meaning not only did we technically own certain rights that superseded the HOA charter, but I also knew where every clause, loophole, and technicality was buried, which made us legally untouchable. But we had hoped to just stay under the radar, live peacefully, and not flex that power, until Karen pushed too far, and the turning point came when she didn't just call 911 again, this time escalating by telling them there was an intruder breaking into the cabin, when in reality it was me unloading groceries. And when the officers arrived with weapons drawn, it was no longer funny, it was dangerous, because that false report could have gotten me killed. And that's when my wife's patience snapped, her attorney instincts roaring back to life as she gathered every false claim, every recorded outburst, and every harassing letter into a thick binder. And at the next HOA board meeting, she walked in dressed not like the retiree Karen thought she was but like the formidable litigator she used to be, heels clicking on the floor, binder under her arm. And when Karen tried to interrupt with her usual point of order routine, my wife calmly but firmly outlined not only the harassment but the multiple criminal charges Karen was exposing herself to with her false 911 calls. And you could see the entire board shift uncomfortably in their seats as they realized they had been letting this woman run wild unchecked. But the real twist came when I finally stood up, introduced myself not just as a neighbor but as one of the original land developers with retained oversight rights, producing documents signed and recorded decades ago that effectively gave me veto power over certain HOA bylaws. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room as Karen's face drained of color. The smugness wiped clean as it dawned on her that the people she had been harassing were not powerless newcomers but the very people who could dismantle her little empire brick by brick. And while we didn't move to the cabin to start a war, the war had been brought to us, so we played the game better than she ever could, because after that meeting, the board not only stripped her of her president title but voted to censure her entirely, banning her from filing complaints without legitimate evidence, and though she tried one last desperate attempt by spreading rumors that we had bought our way into power, the neighbors who had once been silent finally spoke up, telling stories of how she had bullied them for years about mailbox paint colors or lawn ornaments, and suddenly the tide turned against her, leaving her isolated, her voice just another shrill echo bouncing off the cabin walls, and ironically, it was the very gate she hated so much that became a neighborhood favorite, with people stopping to compliment its craftsmanship and ask my wife for advice on fixing their own fences, something that burned Karen up inside every time she saw it. But the ultimate ending, the one that cemented the story forever, happened when a county official paid a visit months later regarding an unrelated land survey, and while looking over property lines, confirmed out loud in front of Karen that our cabin sat on land technically excluded from the HOA entirely, meaning we had never been under their jurisdiction at all, which made every 911 call, every complaint, every demand she had made not only invalid but potentially actionable harassment. And when she heard that, when it was confirmed by an authority figure that she had absolutely no power over us, she literally froze on the spot, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, her clipboard trembling in her hands before she stormed off, never to confront us again directly. And though she still lurks around muttering under her breath, the neighborhood now knows the truth, that the so-called queen of the HOA was dethroned by the very people she tried to bully. And the irony is that all we ever wanted was peace, a nice gate, and a quiet life. But thanks to Karen, we ended up revealing who we really are, and in doing so, we not only protected ourselves but freed an entire neighborhood from her reign of pettiness. So if you enjoyed this story of poetic justice and want more jaw-dropping tales of karma, don't forget to subscribe because trust me, this is just one of many and the next one might be even crazier.